Shalom, Yasharala Shalom. I want to give all praises to the Most High Yahweh, Ba'Hashem, Yahweh Shai. As always, peace and salutations to the hopeful elect. And Salakia for the delay in the videos. I actually been wanting to record this for weeks. Had it recorded a couple times, but I really hated the audio. So I wanted to make sure I came back with the right energy so I could give y'all the proper edification. It's in regards to the Drake and Kendrick beef. As y'all know, all over mainstream media, people was talking about it. Everybody was tuned in. And it goes deeper than just a personal dislike from Kendrick to Drake. It goes deeper than, supremacy and rap history as the greatest legends. When you really look at this beef and you understand the underlying themes and the accusations and the people involved, it has a lot of occultic ties. And for those of y'all who don't understand what the occult is, essentially it's just a code word for a hidden quote-unquote religion or belief system based off of ancient and pagan gods that are worshipped and venerated in the music industry, the movie industry, entertainment industry, things like that. So when you hear a lot of brothers speak about one-eyed symbolism, Masonic symbolism, things of that sort, it oftentimes goes back to this because whether you believe it or not, many of these famous celebrities and athletes, etc., they follow after these guys. Now, again, this is all alleged. Nobody's going to bring out definite proof of stuff like this. You have to be able to read in between the lines and have discernment because these things are secret. That's why they call it the mystery Babylonian and Kemetic school system for a reason. But for those of y'all brothers who are well learned, you obviously understand that. So I want to get into the aspects of who Drake and who Kendrick represents, because when you do some studying in regards to the beef, it oftentimes go back into a battle of good versus evil, dark versus light. But at the core of it, they both represent different aspects of that system, with Drake being the god of the underworld and Kendrick being the god of purity and of light, quote unquote, right? But they both still follow after these pagan traditions. So I want to explain it. So we're going to start off with Drake. Now, for those of y'all who are unfamiliar, Drake represents a lot of the darker aspects of this world, because when you understand the school mystery school system, you have aspects of light witches and dark witches. So essentially Drake, he represents a lot of the dark aspects. This is actually a thumbnail of a video that I saw on YouTube where a YouTuber went into the aspects of Drake having a lot of underground ties in regards to the city in Toronto. When you look at Drake and his music, it represents a lot of carnality, a lot of surface level relationships, dealing with harlots, dealing with prostitutes, taking drugs, things like that. A lot of your carnal and fleshly desires. That's why when you listen to a lot of Kendrick's music, when he was dissing Drake, he was getting into a lot of these aspects, right? So this is just very plain. What does Drake call himself? The sixth god. Now, when you understand the numerology of six, that's oftentimes in representation of Saturn. When you look at somebody and they're throwing up the 6 sign, the number 3, when a NBA player makes a three-pointer, they oftentimes have the mudra symbol. So when you look at this, it oftentimes goes back to the number 6. And when you understand 6, that oftentimes represents Saturn. When you understand that Saturn is the 6th planet away from the sun, and you look up the equivalent of who Saturn is in the mythology, he is the Roman god of agriculture, of harvest, and oftentimes he is associated with death. So just reading into Saturn, right? It says Saturn was a god in ancient Roman religion, a character in Roman mythology. He was described as a god of time, generation, dissolution, abundance, wealth, agriculture, periodic renewals, and liberation. Now, one thing y'all, for those of y'all who are new, is that when you look up a lot of these gods in these different times, like let's say the Roman mythology, right? When you look up the different equivalents, all of these false gods have different characteristics that these artists will represent in different ways within their songs, right? So when you look up Saturn, Saturn oftentimes goes back to the Egyptian god Osiris. Now, when you guys understand Drake's music career, he has a very famous, not famous, but infamous line in one of his original songs called Show Me a Good Time, where Drake describes himself as being like Osiris in the rap industry. So getting into it, this is a quote that I got from Rap Genius from Drake's old song. He says, "I'm the Osiris to the shit right now. So he essentially is quoting Old Dirty Bastard of Wu-Tang, who used it as one of his many nicknames. Drake compares himself to Osiris, the green-skinned ancient Egyptian god of the underworld. Get it? The god of the underworld, right? Underground king. Now, people say, oh, see, Drake was trying to show that he was running the underground game. But when you look at Drake's music, he really hasn't been a very prominent underground artist. I mean, when you even think about his come up, he was on the shows like Degrassi or Nick at Night. So Drake doesn't necessarily represent underground music because, in fact, he was co-signed with Young Money from about the time he was 1 or 2 years in the game. So he hasn't really been an underground artist. This was just showing him, alluding to you that he was rising up in the mystery school system, learning about these different gods, and he's playing the role of Osiris. All right, now when you look up the definition of Osiris, who was Osiris, it says, in ancient Egyptian mythology, Osiris is the god of the underworld and is also the chief judge of the dead and the god of vegetation in the annual Nile flood. He is also closely associated with death, resurrection, and fertility. So as y'all brothers can see from a lot of Drake's symbology, he's just trying to show you something. Again, you have an all-seeing eye in between the number 6, which is the mudra. So Drake is trying to show you something in regards to his music, in regards to his brand, and in regards to what he represents. So again, Drake would be representative as Saturn or Osiris, the god of the underworld. Let's also look at some different pictures with Drake. This is a quick little picture of Drake with his son, ironically named Adonis, right? This is a video called, I think it's called 8 a.m. in Charlotte, right? And I want y'all to look at how Drake is dressed. Drake, he's in literally all black. He has black shoes, black pants, and then he has a black leather jacket. And for those of y'all who don't know, when a lot of these celebrities dress in all black, that is the outfit of a witch. But more importantly, it represents the god Osiris, because Osiris or Saturn is often symbolized being dressed in all black. So this is one of the incarnations of the god of death that a lot of these celebrities allegedly follow and venerate. So when you look at Drake, he oftentimes depicts himself as Saturn. But not only does he depict himself as Saturn, but when y'all look at a lot of his album work, mainly with his last work, and shout out to the brother Quan144, you know, he did a breakdown on this, I don't know, about a year or two ago, where he broke down the symbolisms of For All the Dogs. It goes back to another ancient Egyptian god. So as y'all can see right here, this was the album cover For All the Dogs, and this was written or drawn up by Drake's son Adonis. Ironic enough, Drake's son is named Adonis after another ancient Greek mythology / god, right? So when you look at this, yes, it is a picture of a dog that you could say a kid just drew or wrote up, but this wasn't just by coincidence. This was more than likely orchestrated and planned because of the spiritual significance of who they allegedly venerate in the music industry. So as y'all can see right here, this is the Egyptian god Anubis. I'm sure y'all seen it. You know, if you look at a lot of ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs and mythologies and things like that, this is the dog god, also represented by DMX. So y'all can see right here, it says, Anubis, ancient Egyptian god of funerary practices and care of the dead, represented by a jackal or the figure of a man with the head of a jackal. In the early dynastic period of the Old Kingdom, he enjoyed a preeminent position as Lord of the Dead, but he was later overshadowed by Osiris. So when you look at a lot of Drake's symbology in his album artwork, again, a lot of the symbolisms goes back to gods of the dead. Again, Osiris, you got Anubis as well, the god of the underworld. And that's where a lot of these ancient mythologies go back to. When you look at the image of quote unquote the devil, you see a red man living in the underworld place with fire and lava. He has a pitchfork. That represents Hades. For those of y'all who don't know, Hades is the god of the underworld. So many of the depictions of the underworld and things like that, they really tie back to a lot of these ancient Greek and Egyptian and Canaanite mythologies. And Drake is, in a sense, the aspect of the underworld when you look at a lot of his songs and music and things like that. Now also, this is the music video for First Person Shooter, which ironically enough was the song that catalyzed Kendrick to respond. Kendrick did not respond to First Person Shooter at the time. He did randomly. It was not by coincidence. Now, when you look at this picture, you got both Drake and J. Cole doing a Masonic pose. Oftentimes when you see celebrities grabbing at their chin and looking at something, oftentimes that is a Masonic pose. Y'all can look up the picture of Messi as well as Ronaldo. I think they did the pic like a year ago, where they were also sitting at a table with a chessboard for the black and white, symbolic of, you know, duality, the coming together of opposites, right? So essentially, they're trying to show you something within the picture. For those of y'all who understand and are in the know, it's not a coincidence. Because when you look at not just Drake's album covers, but you also look at J. Cole's, they also represent similar aspects. For those of y'all who don't know, this is J. Cole's last album, The Off Season. And again, this man is literally dressed in all black. Again, dressed in all black. He has one eye shadowed out, so he's showing significance to his right eye, which, for my, you know, y'all brothers correct me if I'm wrong, this would also represent the eye of Haru, or Horus, because J. Cole in his music, he represents Haru or Horus. If y'all look back at one of his first mixtapes, The Warm Up, he has a song called Young Simba. So he himself represents Simba, and Simba, if you guys watch The Lion King, is representative of Haru essentially redeeming the death of his father. When y'all look at The Lion King, essentially, I forgot the name of the original king, but he came and he ruled over, and then Simba had to redeem his father and essentially kill and dethrone Scar, who represented Set, so that way there would be peace and tranquility in their kingdom. It's the same thing. So you can see from J. Cole's album cover that he also represents a lot of the same things as Drake. Now, I'm not 100% sure in regards to the burning of the basketball court, but in my opinion, that represents illumination in regards to the fire. But y'all brothers can correct me. Y'all give your own interpretation on that. Again, I don't know 100% with that one. This is just my personal opinion on it. But let's get back into the aspects with Drake. Now, not only is Drake's first album cover, For All the Dogs, somewhat of an alluding to Anubis, and not only that, but him speaking on himself being called Osiris. But let's also get into this aspect, because one of the main allegations that Kendrick made was that Drake was a certified PDF file, right? Now, a lot of people look at this album cover and they look into it as what is it called? Certified lover boy, because he's alluding to himself dealing with all these women, getting all these women pregnant because they're in love with him. And that could be true. I don't know Drake personally. So again, I'm just going off of the symbolicism of his albums, and not only that, but who he's associated with. But more importantly, sometimes these album covers are play on words, because if you flip the name for Certified Lover Boy, like Kendrick said, certified quote unquote boy lover, this is just something that allegedly could be the representation of his album. When you flip Certified Lover Boy, you get Certified Boy Lover. And there's somebody that Drake was trying to reference himself as all throughout First Person Shooter that many people can correlate to, because again, they have similar programming in the music industry. They play a similar role. As y'all know, this is Michael Jackson, and another controversial, extremely famous, music star. As y'all already know, Michael Jackson was the record that Drake broke when it came to #1 hit single. So again, it's not surprising that him and J. Cole made that song. There's a lot of allusions to Saturn. There's a lot of allusions to duality, black and white, etc. when you look at that music video, because it has a spiritual significance. Now, going into the aspects of Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson had allegations of touching kids. Now, again, I was not born in that time when those allegations were set, so I don't know the specifics of it, and nor was I in, the judicial persecutions on whether or not he was found guilty or not. But when you look at the life of Michael Jackson, it correlates a lot with Drake. Let me explain the reason why. Not only are they great big pop stars, right, but they also have aspects of dual identity. Drake is half Jewish and he's half black. Now, while Michael Jackson was born as a so-called black man, he had identity issues because of quote-unquote alleged skin diseases. I forgot the name of it. It's vitiligo or something like that. I don't remember the specific names, but he had an alleged disease that allowed himself to have features of a Caucasian because his skin was losing pigmentation and melanin. Again, all alleged. but also many people accused him of having different cosmetic surgeries to make himself appear and look more white. His afro became more straight, like the Caucasians, hairstyle. Not only that, but he got surgery on his nose, so he had more of a Caucasian looking nose. So a lot of the things that, people associate with Drake, BBL, Drizzy, him getting his abs done, him having different identity issues and trying to be black, but also quote unquote trying to be white. You can see a lot of the similarities. But one specific thing about Michael Jackson is he allegedly has similar programming to a famous Disney character that I want to get into. Now, this is an article that came out about 11 years ago in regards to the significance of who Peter Pan is. For those of y'all who don't know Peter Pan is essentially a Disney character who was created. And if y'all look at Disney, they have a lot of sinister and hidden symbolisms in not only just their movies, but in their characters. A lot of people grew up watching Disney. A lot of people's parents grew up having them watch Disney. And Disney has a lot of alleged witchcraft that does play spells on young kids. And this Peter Pan aspect is no different. And it ties into what we're talking about. So it says, Peter Pan, a beloved Disney character, is a creepy, sinister PDF file. While a small child, I embraced all things Disney and was excited at the thought of watching the films. Then I grew up and realized that most things Disney are a little bit sadistic. While there are villains in almost all Disney films, the real villain in this film is Peter. Captain Hook is come out smelling like roses. And the first person who ever gave some understanding on this was Judah, Chronicles of Judah, where he oftentimes spoke about how Peter Pan is symbolic of pederasty, right? Again, the practice of grown men messing with boys. This happened in the ancient world, especially in the Greek times. In ancient Greek times, there was a lot of recordings of grown men dealing with underage boys. That was a part of the time. So again, a lot of these different, systems, I'm not going to get into it, but you got Epstein list and Weinstein and all these different things and pizza and hot dogs. You got to understand a lot of the things that happen behind the scenes are just reenactments of what used to happen in ancient Greek, ancient Roman, ancient Egyptian, ancient Canaanite culture that was just passed throughout history because they follow the same gods and they do a lot of the same practices. So get into it. It says, the beginning of the film starts out with the idea of a shadow figure sneaking into the children's room to play and whisk them off to a land of adventure. Peter is the other part to that shadow, breaking and entering into a room full of children to steal them from their parents. And to think when I was little, I would hope for that to happen to me. No wonder my mother was always so big on stranger danger. I have found myself thinking that maybe in an alternate universe this is okay until I remember that kidnapping and breaking and entering are actual crimes that terrify all. And then there is the matter of him using fairy dust to help children fly. I believe Peter Pan has a drug problem and succumbs small impressionable children to his party drugs. Now let's just go down. They're talking about party drugs and stuff like that. But let's go right here. It says, Peter attempts to abduct the children and keep them in Neverland forever. Now remember that word Neverland. It says, I am not a detective, but I have seen enough Lifetime women's films to know that Neverland is code for the basement your abductor will keep you in forever and do weird, freaky things to you. I do, however, know that there is no limitation to Peter Pan's age, which makes this even worse for his case. Peter Pan growing in Neverland prevented him from getting old, which in turn kept him as a young boy for God knows how long. It may have fooled me when I was little, but now I understand that Peter Pan could potentially be a 60-year-old man kidnapping children. And this kind of just going into more of the aspects of the story. I just wanted to get the aspects of Peter Pan. When you look at Peter Pan, he took kids to Neverland, and also he was a young boy who never wanted to grow up, right? Now, when you look at Michael Jackson, many of the allegations is that he was a grown man stuck in the mind of a young kid due to his childhood and his adolescence. He essentially was stuck in a mindset of being a grown boy. Now, let's also look at what the name of his property was. All right, so it says Neverland Ranch. It says Sycamore Valley Ranch, formerly Neverland Ranch, is a developed property in Santa Barbara, California. And I'm gonna go down. It says from 1988 to 2005, It was home and private amusement park of the American singer Michael Jackson. Now, how ironic it is that Michael Jackson named this property Neverland Ranch, which is literally the same name as Neverland in the movie Peter Pan, where Peter Pan, if you look at the deeper meaning, he would, he was the god of pederasty, right? Now, again, Drake has allegations that were brought out from Kendrick where he was trying to reveal the secrets of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, he was referencing underage girls. But again, when you flip the word certified lover boy to certified boy lover, it goes back to the aspects of pederasty, which is something that was accused of Michael Jackson. All alleged, of course. Not only that, but many of these rappers, they follow after this deity. This is the deity of Pan, the goat god, the woodland god, right? So a lot of times when you see a lot of these celebrities with, goats in their album covers, there's a lot of different things that they're alluding to. Even when you look at that song, First Person Shooter, Drake says, go ahead, say it then, who the goat, who the goat. Even, J. Cole alludes to it. A lot of these rappers are constantly trying to get the energy that they're the GOAT, they're the GOAT, they're the GOAT, right? Not even just them, but even with Kendrick. You need to understand something. The god of the music industry behind the scenes is the GOAT god Pan. That's one of the main gods that they look into and they follow after, because in order for you to reach those certain levels, there are certain things that have to go on, man. It's just the truth, bro. People, whether you believe it or not, that's on you. But a lot of these things do happen. It's not a surprise that you have some of the same correlations between Drake, Michael Jackson, to Peter Pan, to the god Pan. And when you look at Drake's name, let's get a understanding on what his name actually means. All right, so when you look up the name Aubrey, and shout out to, I forgot his name, Professor Lex Beats. I was watching one of his videos on it, and he broke down how Drake's first name, Aubrey, it actually alludes to the king of the elves, or the elf ruler. So it says, springing from German and French origins, Aubrey enjoyed many variations before settling as a gender-neutral name it is today. Derived from the Old High German title Alberich, the name means elf ruler. Now let's look up the elf ruler real quick. All right, so when you look up elf ruler, when you look up elf king, it translates into Earl King. Now when you look at the folklore, it says, in European folklore and myth, the Earl King is a sinister elf who lingers in the woods. He stalks children who stay in the woods for too long and kills them by a single touch. So again, sometimes these names can be nomen omens, because you have to understand a lot of these people, they live very scripted lives. And essentially, a lot of their names and their roles that they play go back into a lot of these things. Again, I don't have any proof. Again, this is all alleged, but when you look at some of the things that just keep coming up back and back and back and again and again and again and again, it's not a coincidence, and it shows you that there are spiritual ties to the representation of who Drake is and also to who Kendrick is. So now that we've kind of gone into the aspects of Drake being the god of the underworld, the god of death, right? We're going to go into Kendrick Lamar, who tries to portray himself as a god of light. Now, again, quick disclaimer. When we take Kendrick's lyrics at face value, sometimes he speaks on the Bible, sometimes he speaks on God, and he quotes scriptures. But also, out of his same breath, he'll call himself a god. He'll call himself the voice of God. He'll wear a cross on his head, even though he proclaims himself to follow after Christ and things like that. This man is very double-minded. And that allows you to be able to see what his true intentions may be. Because when you go back to the book of Matthew, I forgot what verse, but Hamashiach, Christ says, no, a man cannot serve two masters, for either he will hate one and love the other. Again, it's very hard for you to be into an industry as riddled with death and pagan idols and self-worship as the music industry, yet be a devoted believer in the Bible, in the Most High, and in his son Christ. It's just the truth. So when you look at a lot of these guys who represent themselves in the music industry, a lot of them follow into this line. So I want to go into 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13. It says, for such are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into the apostles of Hamashiach. And do not marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers also be transformed as the ministers of righteousness. So essentially, Paul was talking to the church of Corinth in his time. But again, these scriptures were given for our learning. So one aspect that Paul talks about is that sometimes there will be false workers trying to make themselves apostles of Christ, but in actuality, they're workers of Satan who are transformed into false angels of light. Because when you look up the term Lucifer, Lucifer means light bearer. So when you look at people who follow after Luciferianism, in the ways of Luciferianism, in many ways they fall into false vessels or false aspects of light. So first one, this is in regards to his song Family Ties back in 2021, because Kendrick, he had a time period where he was gone for a minute, he was out of the light, and he all of a sudden came back. Well, you have to understand, in the occult system, that was Kendrick being dead, being killed, and then reborn. Because when you look at the Black Panther, there's a lot of symbolisms to Osiris. You know, shout out to Chronicles of Judah, but he broke down how the Black Panther is just really a retelling of the aspects of Osiris. Because again, Osiris was killed and he was reborn, and his legacy was reborn back through Haru. So this is just a quick search. It says, are Osiris and Horus the same? It says this dual role was in turn combined with the Egyptian concept of divine kingship. The king at death became Osiris. So again, when you look at Kendrick and he was talking about X or 10, he was doing that soundtrack for the Black Panther. In many ways, he was representing Osiris, the god of the underworld, right? So it says the king at death became Osiris, god of the underworld, and the dead king's son, the living king, was identified with Horus, a god of the sky. Now keep that in mind, who Kendrick represents. Elohim is just a term for the word that means Lord or deity, etc., etc. So let's read it. It says Elohim is a Hebrew word that is the most often used reference to the single God of Israel in the Old Testament. The term, which translates to gods or deities, is also used in the Bible to describe other supernatural beings. It is commonly used with the word Yahweh. The real translation is Yahweh, the personal name of the Most High. Here, Kendrick compares himself to the Most High as the rebirth, or the second coming of Hamashiach. And so let's read that. He says the Elohim, the rebirth. Why does he call himself the rebirth? Because Kendrick proverbially died on that Black Panther album, was gone for a certain amount of time, and came back as Mr. Morales in a big stepper, which for him was a symbol of purity, of illumination. Even when you look at the album cover, again, Kendrick has the quote-unquote crown of thorns, and he also has in the background, you know, not only his wife, his kids, but he has a purple background. Purple oftentimes represents illumination. When it comes to another famous beef, not only between Drake and J. Cole, Drake versus Kendrick, you also have Nas versus Jay-Z. And Nas represented the light. He represented the illuminated ones because he came out with Stillmatic. He was down and out, and you see he's wearing the cross for Tammuz, and he's also dressed in the orange to show his illumination. And when you look at this album, listen to that song Ether, Nas called himself the God. When you look at the chorus, he says, I put your soul in ether, will teach you the king, you know you not, God's sons across the belly. Nas refers to himself as God's son. He even has an album called God's Son after this album. Nas tried to show himself to quote unquote be on the symbol of being a God or being the son of God. But he's not talking about the son of God that people ignorantly believe to be the figure of quote unquote Jesus Christ. He's essentially saying that he's the reborn sun God, just like Kendrick. So getting into the lyrics back on Family Ties, Kendrick says, before you get to the Father, you gotta holla at me first. So obviously clear blasphemy, just very straightforward. The dude's trying to proclaim himself to be Hamashiach. But when you look at it from the mystery school system, he's saying in order for you to get to the Father, you got to go through him because he is the anointed sun God. He is the anointed illuminated one. So essentially, if you guys understand the story of Tammuz, Tammuz was the reincarnated version of Nimrod. When you look back at the ancient story, the mythology is that Nimrod impregnated Semiramis, and Nimrod was cut up by Shem, right? And essentially his pieces were dispersed across the different kingdoms, and Semiramis had another son who they proclaimed was to be reborn Nimrod. She was impregnated by the rays of the sun, and she had this child who was the divine quote-unquote child of prophecy from a virgin mother. And that's where you get the story of Tammuz. So essentially, Kendrick, when he says before you get to the Father, you gotta have me first, he is essentially playing that role of being the reborn Elohim, the reborn God. So he's calling himself the anointed sun God. I'm the figure to get you to the Son. I'm the figure to get you to the Father. You got to go through me. And that's why when you listen to a lot of Kendrick's music and you look at the symbolism of a lot of his songs, they do reference the Bible. But his role in the occult system, alleged role, is that he is the anointed savior. He is the ray of light, come to heal people, come to bring you into the light, to make you repent for what you've done wrong. Even when you look at his lines in the song Meet the Grams, look what he tells Drake. All right, so first we're going to go over the aspect of what he said in the song 616 in LA, which had a lot of symbolism as well. He says the mannerisms of Raphael. Raphael is the Most High's holy archangel, right? He says, I can heal and give you art. So it says Kendrick invokes the names of two Raphaels. The first is the famed Italian painter and architect who, alongside being widely seen as one of the three great masters of the Renaissance, which was a major inspiration of the form of art known as mannerisms. Now, the second aspect of Raphael is the archangel associated with Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, and is traditionally associated with healing. Indeed, the word Rapha, the stem of his name, means healing in Hebrews. Kendrick also references the concepts of three angels watching over him earlier in the track and mentions two other angels in his family ties verse. So again, Kendrick is alluding himself to being like Raphael, able to heal people, right, through his words, through his music. When you also go into the lyrics of Meet the Grams, Kendrick said this to Drake. He said, you lied about the only artist that can offer you some help. So in Kendrick's eyes, he felt like he was the only one who could heal and cause Drake to go through this cycle where he was brought down low and he was reborn as a better person. So again, Kendrick sees himself as the anointed son, the son of the sun god. I did a video on this a few years ago in regards to Kendrick and the symbolism in his videos. So it's very telling that he brings this stuff up in his music and he keeps referring to it. Again, no true man who follows after Hamashiach is going to say stuff like this in his songs. It is what it is. You got to be able to separate Kendrick as the rapper compared to what he represents spiritually, because he don't represent a lot of the things that you read and learn in the Bible. So as y'all can see, this is a depiction of the false god Tammuz, where he has the stars around him and he has the rays of the sun, and he's being lifted up as this great child who essentially is gonna, fulfill this great role in society. This is just a mirroring of the true prophecy of what the Son of the Most High, Yahweh Shai, would eventually fulfill. And these things are mirrored so that way people can be deceived from knowing the true understanding, and they can get roped into a lot of the false pagan traditions that the vast majority of this earth follows, with Christmas, with Easter, with Thanksgiving, whatever holiday that's not within the word. It all typically goes back to these false gods. And also, when y'all look at the video Count Me Out, you see Kendrick in a field full of goats. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but you got to ask yourself a question. Why is Kendrick surrounded with goats if he proclaims to? Because when you read the Bible, Hamashiach says, I will separate the goats from the lambs, and those who represented the goats will be placed into the everlasting fire, prepared for the devil and his angels and those who are wicked. Whereas the lambs would be representative of righteousness. So he must be talking about a different type of goat, going back into the God Pan of the music industry, and how Kendrick says, don't you address me unless it's with 4 letters. Call me the GOAT. This is really just a huge symbolic and occultic battle for who's going to receive that top spot in the rap industry, because they're playing out an ancient mythos, an ancient pagan tradition and ritual that's been going on for centuries. Now, I also want to go back into some of the aspects in regards to what these different artists represent when it comes to this different battle. So also, you need to understand, Kendrick can often represent the Egyptian god called Ra. So we just read it real quick. It says, Ra, the sun god, and the supreme deity in some periods of ancient Egyptian history, is not normally associated with a cyclical rebirth like Osiris. Instead, Ra is often depicted as eternal and unchanging, representing the sun's constant presence and life-giving force. Now let's read this, right? It says, however, there are variations and interpretations within Egyptian mythology. Some texts and traditions do mention Ra's nightly journey through the underworld, during which he faces various challenges and dangers before emerging victorious each morning at sunrise. This journey could be seen metaphorically as a form of rebirth or renewal, as Ra transitions from the underworld back into the sky to illuminate the world once again. So when you look at Kendrick's journey, right, you have Damn, where he's talking about damnation. He's, alluding to certain understandings and knowledge, but essentially Kendrick is killed on the album, because when you play the album in reverse, what happens on Blood? He gets shot and he dies. And then also the last song, Duckworth, there is him alluding to his father getting shot and dying, and his legacy essentially discontinues. But also you have the Black Panther, where he's referencing Osiris, very, very blatant. King's dead, 10, paramedic is very straightforward, right? So it says Ra transitioned from the underworld and back into the sky to illuminate the world once again. So that's what was represented with Kendrick being gone for 4 years, coming back to represent Mr. Morales in a Big Stepper. He's dressed in all white in that song N95. He's calling himself the sun, all this crazy blasphemy, and now he's back to illuminate the world, just like what happened with Nas. So when you look at this battle, let's go into the aspects of Osiris versus Set. All right, we'll just read it real quick. I don't want to go through all of these, but it says, the story of Osiris and Set is one of the most famous myths in ancient Egyptian mythology. Osiris is a god of the afterlife, fertility, and agriculture, while Set was a god of chaos, storms, and violence. In the myth, Set becomes jealous of Osiris's popularity and power, so he derives a plan to usurp him. Set tricks Osiris into entering a coffin, which he then seals and throws into the Nile River. Osiris drowns and his body is torn into pieces and scattered across Egypt. And I'll go down. It says Osiris's wife Isis and her sister Nephthys search for Osiris's body parts and eventually find them. With the help of the god Thoth, they reassemble Osiris and revive him briefly to conceive a child, Horus, who would later seek revenge for his father's death. And that's the same symbology of the Lion King, right? So it says, meanwhile, Set usurps the throne of Egypt. Horus grows up and challenges Set for the throne, leading to a series of battles between the two. The conflict is eventually resolved through the intervention of the other gods, who declares Horus the rightful king of Egypt. So it's basically it says the story symbolizes the struggle between order and chaos, with Osiris representing order and Set representing chaos. But also you do have to understand some of the aspects of the mythology, they're not 100% parallel. Some aspects may come from the Greek, some aspects may come from the Egyptian, some aspects may come from the Canaanite. But again, you're going to see the parallel. So it says the story of Baal versus Mot, also known as Baal cycle or Baal myth, is a Canaanite myth that tells the story between the storm god Baal, which would represent Kendrick, because also Kendrick alludes himself to being Prince, right? Prince has songs like Purple Rain, he has songs like Thunder, and Prince was dressed in purple as well. So it says the battle between the storm god Baal and a god of death and drought Mot, which will represent Drake. It says in the myth, Baal, the god of rain, fertility, and storms, battles Mot for supremacy over the earth. Baal's victory ensures fertility, abundance, and life, while Mot's victory results in death, drought, and barrenness. And I'm gonna be honest, brothers, I don't want to read all of this, but you got the different aspects with Zeus versus Typhon. So when you look at a lot of these different mythologies, it's just a replaying of old ancient occultic rituals, pagan rituals, again, which is why you got to separate the art from the artist, because when you get to that level, different associations, you can get caught in too deep and start worshiping after these false pagan gods. So pray the Most High please watch over you and protect you, from these different things. Again, these are all allegations. Don't take anything I said to 100% heart. Do your own research and study and look it up for yourself. But understand that a lot of these celebrities, they in too deep when it comes to following these pagan traditions. And again, the man cannot serve two masters. So I give all praises to the Most High Yahweh by Hashem Yahushai. Till next time, it's Osh signing out.